first on the agenda.
Who is?
You.
What am I going to say?
Have changes to the work.
What Bob is that? Let's start. Let's say we're ready to start. Take your seats.
Okay, I'd like to start the audit committee meeting, please. Take your seats. First thing on the agenda, do we have any public comments?
Any public comments? Yes, he just did. Nope, there are no speakers, Jim.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to accept? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Mike, audit committee work plan.
There are no changes to the work plan. The next audit committee meeting is in January, which will include the independent accountant's review of the third quarter 2015 consolidated financial statements. I'll present update of my department for the calendar year 2015 as well as the proposed audit plan for 2016. And then information technology will come and talk about their report, as well as we'll have an update again on the Department of Civil Rights information that they're required to do. That's it, Jim.
Okay, any questions? Okay, next we have Mike Fritz from Deloitte. Audit approach and plan coordination.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to highlight the 2015 audit plan, which was previously provided to you for your review. Our contract includes the audit of the MTA headquarters, First Mutual Transportation Assistance Company, Long Island Railroad Company, Metro North Computer Railroad Company, MTA Bus Company, New York City Transit Authority, Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority, Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, and the single audit of federal awards for 2015. Our primary responsibility is to plan and perform the audit of the financial statements to obtain reasonable assurance whether the financial statements are in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles and are free of material misstatement. I'm assisted this year by a reoccurring team of partners, directors, and senior managers. You have Glenn Friedrich and Mike Malloy, who are my partners and directors that assist me on this engagement, and we are very familiar with the operations of the MTA. Our audit approach is risk-based. We are looking for areas in the financial statements where there could be a risk of material misstatement in those financial statements. We've identified one significant risk, which is consistent with the prior year, that being management override of controls, primarily journal entries that could be used to overinflate revenue, under-report expenses, and things of that nature. Other areas where we plan to audit or focus our procedures this year would include GASB 68, which I presented to you a highlight of at the last meeting, which will have a major impact on recording a large liability on your financial statements. Capital assets, including construction work in progress, pension and other post-employment benefit obligations. We look at fare revenues, including ticket and passenger revenues, as well as vehicle tolls, grants, appropriations, and tax revenues, and finally, implementation of the new uniform grant guidance audit procedures of the federal government, which replaces the old single audit A133 procedures. During the audit, we will be utilizing internal specialists to look at various areas in the financial statements, including where we're looking at the information technology controls and procedures of your computer systems, as well as security of that system. We use specialists in looking at journal entries. As I mentioned before, that's an area that we do have significant risk focus on. Investment valuation, where we're using some of our experts that deal with the various investments to make sure that the fair value of those investments are recorded properly. Valuation of derivatives and hedges. And finally, actuarial estimates as it would relate to the OPEB, the self-insurance liabilities, and other obligations that are estimates by management. We have started our planning and reviews of the financial controls and will be completed with that work by December. Starting in mid to late January, we start our year-end audit procedures. We expect to complete the financial statement audits during the month of April. In June, we will issue the single audit report on the schedule of federal awards and also issue our management level letter on internal controls. be glad to answer any questions you might have about the risks that we'll be focusing on.
Any questions? Great, thank you. Aman, you're next. Enterprise Risk Management and Internal Control Guidelines.
Yes, each year this committee is required to review our internal control guidelines, which sets out the structure of our program. We have no recommended changes at this time.
Okay, any questions? Okay. That's later on the agenda.
Item 9.
Item 9. Okay, Enterprise Risk Management Update. Lamont.
Okay. Good. Okay. All right, so I thought I would start. At the last audit committee meeting, one of the questions that was raised to us was the interrelationship and how it works between myself as the Chief Compliance Officer, the Auditor General, Deloitte, and others in terms of the internal control program. So I think it's about 3 slides to just kind of try to explain that very quickly. Okay. And we're going to use a concept called lines of defense, which was actually developed by the Institute of Internal Auditors. It lays out the relationship that exists. First of all, it's important to remember that the primary focus on this is managing the risk. And it starts with the business process and the business process owners at that business unit level. So if you remember, before I said at prior meetings, this is driven truly at the departmental level, and it works its way up to us. It also lays out the responsibilities for myself in terms of our compliance and risk management program and our responsibilities. And it also just lays out the responsibilities of internal audit as well as a relationship to the IG, Deloitte, and others. Oh, thank you. One of these days I'll learn to work this properly. Okay. As I said, it starts with the business process owners. They are directly responsible for reporting to senior management on their business activities. They identify the key business processes. They design and manage the controls that are underneath their areas of responsibility. They are the ones who are actually conducting our annual vulnerability and risk assessments. And they're also the ones who are ultimately responsible for the corrective action plans associated with any control deficiencies. We note here that the levels of independence here is no. Obviously, every manager within the organization expects to uphold the highest levels of integrity with what they do. But again, they are a direct report to senior management. The next line of defense is ourselves, which is corporate compliance and enterprise risk management. We have a certain level of independence. We have a reporting obligation to this committee as well as the CEO. So there's a greater level of independence in terms of our review. We are responsible for providing managerial level assurance of the effectiveness of our internal controls. We are involved in monitoring, facilitating both the design and operation of our control environment, along with assisting and advising that first line of defense. We are involved in the development and implementations of policies and procedures within the organization, as well as tracking the enterprise-wide risks and controls. Sure.
When you use the term independence, what do you mean in that context?
It's really discussing a reporting relationship. If you look at the Internal Control Act, it lays out certain reporting structures with the assumption that if you report to a certain person within the organization, you have a certain level of control. So, for example, the statute clearly states that I have to report to the CEO for purposes of internal control. That same statute also clearly indicates that Mike Vasili has to report to this committee for purposes of internal control. So it's setting up the certain levels of reporting that are statutorily based.
Is there any other broken line of relationship that we should be
My
examining?
entire organizational chain is lots of broken lines. I have obligations to this committee. I have obligations to the governance committee as well as to the CEO and the general counsel. I report to many people.
Why should you be any different?
And again, the audit services has the greatest level of independence as reporting directly to this committee, and they basically provide assurance on effectiveness of our internal controls, including whether myself as well as the departments and managers are in fact doing what we should be doing and achieving the goals that we have set out for ourselves. And finally, sitting out beyond all of this is, of course, the MTA Inspector General with its ability to audit as well and investigate, as well as Deloitte and a whole host of what I call alphabet soup, but the various regulatory organizations that have oversight over us. So I'll get right into the main part of the report. Okay. Quick snapshot of the period. All agencies have submitted their annual internal control certifications, and the programs are all working well and fully compliant with the requirements of the Act. The ERM committee met again during this period and continues its role as oversight in the entire risk management program. The agencies continue to document their vulnerability assessments in our computerized system, and we are working closely on all the open material weaknesses and significant deficiencies that have been identified by our program. In terms of the summary of the controls, we now have over 1,800 total business processes within the catalog of business processes. We have 753 of those identified as significant. There are over 4,000 risks identified in the process and over 6,000 controls mitigating those risks. Thank you. In terms of drivers right now, obviously procurement consolidation, IT transformation, and we're still working on some issues with the Treasury transformation as well. External driven risk changes. Again, one of the things that I mentioned the last time is that the New York State has mandated that we do internal control training. As of the end of September, we had trained over 21,000 employees on internal controls, and we are continuing to work on revisions to the guidelines based upon new coastal standards. Yes?
Beyond the individual risks and the total risks that are, I guess, tied to certain processes, are there dimensions of risk that we should be discussing?
Dimensions. I mean, what the program does is starts off with a catalog of business processes. For every one of those processes, there's an identified objective, the risks to achieving that objective, and what controls management has determined are necessary to mitigate those risks. So in terms of significance, yes, I mean, there is a ranking, an overall risk ranking that exists for those. Okay. Just a quick snapshot in terms of the process. Again, some of these numbers I've already mentioned, but there are approximately 19 people throughout the organization with a certain dedicated level of responsibility. But again, the key portion of the program is that it infiltrates or gets into every department within the organization. And again, that's what drives the program forward. Now, we reported last year on some of the base numbers. This is just a year-to-year comparison. As you can see, the number of significant business process has increased. While the total number of business processes has gone down, the number of total risks has gone up by about 273, but the total number of controls has gone down by about 49. At this point, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Mike Facility and his team for the work they've been doing in helping us really identify what our key risks are and to identify what controls are really important in terms of mitigating those risks. Yes, sir.
Two questions, please. One, can you give us the highlights of what was added, or what were added, which processes were added during the period, and then maybe give us a sense of why?
Well, Unfortunately, I can't give that information to you, but I don't have it with me today, but I will provide that to you. And as I had mentioned before, again, we have those three areas working very closely together. And I know that Mike has been and his team has been very good at helping us, kind of focus in on what controls are important and to identify, for example, repetitive controls that aren't necessary. So, but yeah, we can provide you with more detail, absolutely.
An example could be like DDCR, just doing site visits or closing out contracts, making sure controls over the closeout of contracts are added, emphasized in the organization, adding those controls. So the committee has been, apprised of areas where needed increased controls.
I'm only asking because 11% increase in number of processes. It's not like our business has changed recently by 10%. We're doing the same business we've always done. So the fact that we've had what in your world would literally be called material, or their world would be called material, we've had a material increase in number of processes. Business hasn't changed. So just be worth understanding what's behind it. And maybe it's just a natural course of things. We just add things. But you beg the question in some ways by showing this to us.
No problem. I mean, if I could take a little bit of deference, I mean, right now we are going through substantial change. There's lots of change going on right now. Some of these processes may not exist after we finish with the consolidation and what have you. So right now we are in a very large state of flux.
Under which category would the BSC come? Would that be MTA HQ? Or?
Yes, that's HQ.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, don't get me wrong, this is the most fulsome reporting on risk I have seen since I'm a member. So it's welcome. But there are aspects to this that are that might help in future presentations and assist our understanding of, by dimensions of risk, I mean, the broad categories of it, and how they rank. I mean, serious,
Sure.
Are we okay? Are we increasing? Are we decreasing? That kind of thing. That helps us understand what the nature of our enterprise is.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely provide you with that information. Again, what we're trying to do is to understand what it is that you need to see, and I'd be more than happy to provide whatever information you need.
Thanks.
So out of the 753 significant business processes, 443 were reviewed during this period. Corrective action plans, again, these are related to significant business processes. As of last year, we had reported 84. Of those 84, during the course of this year, we have closed out 75. We have added 21 new corrective action plans for a total during this reporting period. Of those 30, I'm happy to say as of now, let's see if the slide works. There are only 16 left that are open out of that 30. I think one of the things that I was asked the last time was, again, I think to kind of talk, your point was about dimension of significance in terms of what we had reported. So this chart just kind of breaks down based upon our overall risk ranking. Again, overall risk ranking looks at two things, basically. It takes the risk and asks how significant is this if it should occur, and then how likely it is to actually happen if we put no controls in place. Multiply it out, you get a number, and that number equates to high, medium, low, et cetera. So this is just kind of a quick breakdown in terms of where those things fall in terms of the corrective action plans and how they relate to the risk and how significant the risk is.
Generally tied to a function. To give it texture and meaning, it's tied to a function, like investments.
Right.
What are we doing here? Is the risk increasing, stable, decreasing?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
This matrix is nice, but it doesn't describe it.
So, I'm sorry, can you just go back? You just jumped off the... Yeah. So if according to, following on what our vice chairman said, if you double-clicked on the 1, that's an MTHQ. Do we know what that 1 is?
That's DDCR.
Okay.
And what that means is for that particular risk, the management, the DDCR who was doing the analysis said that was a overall medium. They took, if I remember correctly, the significance of it they felt was very high. The likelihood of occurring at that point, I believe they thought was medium to low, which gives you this overall medium. But of course, it's on our list as being significant because we believed it was. And again, this is an ongoing process. As we work with the department in the year to come, you know, that likelihood number in light of everything may more than likely change in terms of how likely that is to actually occur. We live, we learn, and we adjust, and that's the important part of it. It's an ongoing living process. So we did a quick, assessment in terms of each of the agencies, in terms of the areas of risk that are most significant. Safety was number one, followed by security, infrastructure, and equipment maintenance, and succession planning. In terms of an agency-wide, again, safety is also at the top of the list, followed by succession planning and institutional transformation in terms of key risk areas that we are focusing on. That's my presentation. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Okay. You're on again, this time for requirements of the Internal Control Act.
Okay. Yes. The Internal Control Act requires that the MTA Board issue guidelines, that it ensures that we have an internal control program that is identifying business processes, objectives, risks, and controls, that we have policies and procedures in place that our employees will have to comply with, that you designate somebody to be responsible and come to this committee to explain what's going on with internal controls, as well as have an independent auditor general. So I'm here today to tell you that based upon my review, I believe we are fully compliant with all the requirements of the Internal Control Act.
Any questions? Okay. Next, we have a review of the Audit Committee Charter. Okay, Mike?
Yeah, as part of the annual review of the Audit Committee Charter, the committee's advised that we need to make no changes at this time. We did look at the charter a few years ago. We look at it every year, and we had made some changes then, but for this year, and through Lamont's input, and we don't have to make any changes at all.
Okay, I need a motion to go forward with no changes. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, Annual Audit Committee report.
The committee has been provided with a copy of the proposed report to the board from the Audit Committee Chair related to the activities of the Audit Committee for the past 12 months. The Audit Committee was involved with financial reporting, which included the reappointment of the external auditors, an evaluation and discussion of internal controls, as you just had today as well, and during the year. Governance issues as it relates to any governance issues that were raised by Deloitte, external auditors, myself, or Lamont, the Chief Compliance Officer, or even the General Counsels. Also, technology issues, where a discussion of key technology issues facing the MTA and the risks involved. So that's what the year was involved with. You'll be sent a copy of the signed version, and with that, that's my report, Jim.
Okay, I need a motion to accept Mike's report. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, open audit recommendations.
Yes, we have provided the committee with a report on open audit recommendations based upon the information provided to us by Audit Services. We believe that currently there are 8 open audit recommendations which have exceeded 6 months past their original implementation date. If you have any questions, we have asked that members of the staff be present to answer any questions that you may have on any of these recommendations.
Just to put that in context for the committee, just as a reminder, my office issues about 600 recommendations a year. Plus, we have the external auditors, the state controller, the city controller, and various other regulatory authorities issuing recommendations, which is about another 100 a year. So out of which my office monitors all of those audit recommendations. And working with Lamont, not to say these 8 are not important, but to put it in context, it's 8 out of about 700 per year, so going back.
That's a good number. ranges from 9 months to 36 months.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Right.
That's a problem when it gets to that level.
Management is here in certain ones. If you have any issues on ones, they are here to discuss why it did delay some of the recommendations by that time.
We'd be-
And get prepared to discuss that with you.
Yes.
Should you have any areas that you want to discuss.
Well, since we just got them, I think we should get a chance to look them over.
Well, then just broadly, without going into specifics right now, we can always do that. But just broadly, what's the cause for some of the more
egregious delay?
Well, I think there may be a couple of factors that play into this. And again, it's hard to say, on a broad basis, because there's not one thing that I could say, it's this, it's this, it's this. I mean, some of it is what I had mentioned before. Some of these things are now, kind of rolled up into this transformational process. So as we've noted in prior transformations, things have a tendency of what I guess you could call losing ownership as the processes are being re-engineered, as responsibilities are being changed. That's some of it. I mean, that's just recent. But if you have some.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
And if I want to add, I mean, the business service centers and technology is ongoing. The PeopleSoft 9.2 upgrade, that's tremendous lift for the agency, and significant work has to be done. A lot of these recommendations, I looked at them as well, are contingent upon that upgrade. Once the upgrade is completed, these recommendations will be very easily implemented. It's just that the timing of it, when we made the recommendations, not knowing the timing of the 9.2 upgrade,
That's a
came at a
big-
point. That is the gist of the answer.
Thank you. But this, again, this granularity of reporting in these areas is welcome.
Absolutely.
The more we can find to it, I think we serve the board and the people for whom we are stewards much better.
Absolutely. And Lamont and my staff, with these 8, they're going to still be on the radar screen, and we'll make sure that they are implemented. Jim?
Okay.
Okay.
We need to go into executive session to discuss security data. So, that means motion to go in. Can I get a copy of those? Motion to go back into public session? All in favor? Carried. I need a motion to adjourn.